everybody. I'm Charlene Shirk. I'm your host of Digital Champions, where we get to speak to some of the most innovative thinkers in the digital space. And we've got Brandon Pierpont, Painter Marketing Pros, joining us here today. Brandon, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Charlene.
You know, it's all about today, the riches are in the niches, and you have really cornered a specific space in the digital marketing world, if you will. Talk to us a little bit about what you do and kind of how this came about.
Yeah, so prior to Painter Marketing Pros, I ran a generalist agency, and one of the themes that we noticed was every time you would onboard a new customer, if they're in a different niche, there would sort of be this learning curve, kind of this on-ramp period for the agency. And we just decided, you know, if you actually can niche down, you can basically deliver better results in a shorter time frame, which I think everyone's looking for.
And how did you come up with narrowing it down to painters, the needs that painters have in the digital marketing space?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we worked with a lot of home services companies, painters specifically. We had a number of clients, and we found that we generated really good results for them. It was also an underserved industry. So I think painters in general kind of been left behind. Plumbers, electricians, there's been a lot of activity around trying to help those verticals, whereas painters specifically, there really weren't many agencies kind of gearing toward helping painters.
And are you working with larger companies? Are you working with the individual guy? Like, how do you know which is a good space, a good size company for you to be able to use these marketing services?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we actually started, it's evolved a little bit. I would say that our client size has kind of expanded. We started with companies that were just doing over $1 million a year in revenue. That was our benchmark. Those companies were more established, typically had a sales team member, at least, or several members at that point. And so they were really able to sell the leads and everything that we were generating for them. But it's also a highly fragmented market. So there are a lot of individual operators, a lot of people with just, you know, one crew out there. And so we actually created some I guess, kind of more downstream service options to help those smaller companies actually cross that $1 million threshold.
Now, there's nothing where somebody comes to you for help and you're like, sorry, you don't fit the criteria, but you know they have the potential to fit the criteria. That's kind of feeding your pipeline as well.
It is. Yeah. I mean, for me, honestly, the dream customer is someone who has maybe been around for a year or two, is entrepreneurial. We get a lot of our clients who are members of the PCA. We run an educational series with the Painting Contractors Association, and those members tend to be more forward-thinking. And then ultimately, they can grow with Painter Marketing Pros. We really view our relationship with them as a partnership, you know, not just a vendor-client kind of relationship. And ultimately, our goal is to see them get to $1 million and really 5 million plus over the years.
All right, so let's break this down. We're here talking about innovative thinking in the digital space. So how do you use this digital space to get customers for your painting clients or your painter clients?
Yeah, so it's you know, there are quite a few avenues we use. We use a lot of automations to, especially with the smaller guys, to help with the inbound sales process. We use Facebook, Google. We do some programmatic advertising. So it is somewhat situational. It's somewhat dependent on the company's budget as well. You know, for us, the ideal client's actually probably pursuing 4 or more different channels at any given time, because you're going to obviously acquire different customers different ways, and you want to have multiple touch points if possible. But if for the lower budget client, we'll typically start with either Google PPC or Facebook ads.
And so I'm on Pinterest and I'm looking at all the pretty houses and the colors of the paint on the wall. Am I going to get an email from you?
We don't do too we don't do too much with Pinterest. We do some in the way of email marketing. We do a lot on Instagram. We find a lot of success with Instagram just because it is so visual. But yeah, it is somewhat dependent on the location and the painting company.
And where do you see this industry going, this niche going in terms of its digital marketing needs in the next couple of years, say?
Yeah, I see consolidation happening. So kind of an aside, my plumbing company, my personal plumbing company, just got bought up by a really big corporation, and I've seen a lot of shifts in their processes. And I see that, I view painting as kind of a few years behind the plumbing industry. So there's been a lot of consolidation there. I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation in painting. I think 2021 created a bit of a bubble, a bit of an odd supply-demand ratio where jobs were a lot easier to come by. And that created probably more painting companies than really the market's ultimately going to be able to bear. So I think there's going to be consolidation. I think the winners are going to be the companies that embrace the tech, that embrace the automation, and that ultimately lean into marketing and growth and don't just, rely on this old school word of mouth methodology alone.
Well, I was going to ask you what your best tip is, but I feel like you just answered that question. You got to get on board with the technology. Brandon, thanks so much for joining us today. Who knew there was so much out there in terms of a painter's market niche? Such good information from you.
I appreciate you having me, Charlene. It was a pleasure.
Oh, it's our pleasure. And that's Brandon Pierpoint with Painter Marketing Pro. See, there's a niche everywhere, folks. Well, thanks so much for joining us on Digital Champions. And if you'd like to learn more about Brandon or some of the other great thinkers that we've talked to, you can go to dailyadbrief.com. That's going to do it for us. Hope you have a good one, and we look forward to seeing you next time.